On the unfolding show down at Guantánamo. Joining me is Sarah Flounders, head of the International Action Centre Human Rights Group in New York. Sarah, good evening to you. Thanks for being with us. We've been talking to various guests about this story tonight. If the abuse of the inmates is described as true, it begs the question, maybe, I know I'm just being devil's advocate, maybe there were repeated transgressions, that's why the authorities were clamping down on them. Is that a theory or not?
Well, it's certainly not a valid theory. The treatment at Guantánamo from the very first moment that these prisoners were kidnapped on the other side of the world and brought to Guantánamo has been horrendous. And it's organizations such as Center for Constitutional Rights who have fought for the most elementary rights for these prisoners. And their hunger strikes are the only way they have of even making themselves heard. Years and years without any hope of release, without any real charges. It was a Center for Constitutional Rights study that took the U.S. government's own figures to confirm that 92% of all the prisoners held at Guantánamo really had no connection at all to al-Qaeda. They were simply sort of bought and sold and brought to Guantánamo as part of the U.S. war on terror, justified as part of that war, and with no real standing. And they're really just part of the thousands of prisoners held around the world in U.S. secret prisons, on prison ships, secret bases. It's an enormous problem, and they're only also a part of the hundreds of Muslim prisoners in the U.S. who've been held, who've been framed up on charges, and who are held in solitary confinement in special management units, SMUs.
Bearing in mind what you're saying, this is just, if you like, the tip of it, but it's the most noticeable tip, isn't it? Why is it, though, is that it's mainly Guantánamo that's talked about when this comes up?
Well, the U.S. own publicity that somehow this U.S. base, but off of the U.S. mainland, gave them complete control and out of the hands of U.S. courts. So its very existence was a challenge. And this is where they claimed they were bringing the high-profile prisoners. But as I say, 92% of them had what kind of a failure rate is that? For those with no charges. And even those with whom they made specific charges, they've used all manner of torture, of waterboarding, of isolation, and so on, again and again. This is really, on every aspect, a crime.
I mean, I know you feel very much for them, but are you telling me that no one in there deserves to be there?
Well, the real question is U.S. treatment. No one in the world deserves this form of U.S. treatment, which has become absolutely routine and systematic. That is the use of torture, the use of isolation, humiliation, degradation, religious insult. All of this is
Well, how's it allowed to continue? We've been banging on about this for years. I've spoken to you before, Sarah, many times about the thing. I'm sure a lot of the American public know about it, don't they?
Well, it's allowed to continue despite every promise, including promises by the Obama administration that the first thing he would do, and this was 4 years ago, was to shut down Guantánamo. And of course he didn't, because there's big interests at stake in this lie that has now been extended into the NDAA, an attack on the rights of everyone in the U.S. and people around the world. It's extended those who a decade ago were kidnapped and put into prisons. Today, they simply fire a drone at them and assassinate, whole villages.
Okay.
So this has been a big extension of attacks on everyone's rights, dignity, and it's important these prisoners are resisting with the only measure, the only thing that they can do is to not eat food in order to attract attention to the grievous conditions and the insults that they are routinely given, the degradation.
But where's it going to get them? Where's it going to get them? This isn't the first hunger strike either. This is one of many that have happened over the years. Where's it going to get them? I know you're saying they're desperate, but what's the point if no one's going to listen?
Well, prisoners around the world, and this is true in the Palestinian struggle, the Irish struggle, the struggle in South Africa, here in the U.S., know that a hunger strike at least may be a way of reclaiming dignity. of showing resistance in the face of overwhelming power. And that is why these prisoners, I think, have chosen the same tactic. What else? They have no other weapon but their own body.
Well, of course, the argument for keeping Guantanamo open, the US maintains that the intelligence gathered there has been a lifesaver for many Americans, and it is a good thing. That's the argument for it. Do you agree with that?
No, it's a complete fraud. It's a complete fraud because any information gained through torture and isolation, what kind of information is that? These people are held for years and years. And it's an outrage. Guantanamo should be shut down, absolutely. And the thousands held in secret prisons, there has to be an accounting for that.
So when do you think it's,
prisoners held here
when do you
in the
think
US.
it's going to close? And we're hearing this time and time again. We've been asking our various guests this throughout the night. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's ever going to close?
It has to close. And I think the work that a number of very courageous and determined lawyers have done has been exemplary in challenging this policy. But it also needs to be a much larger challenge here in the U.S. and around the world, demanding an end to these policies of torture.
Sarah Flounders, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We're going to go to our break soon, but it's been lovely to talk to you tonight, head of the International Action Centre Human Rights Group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with yet another